Florida has one of the deadliest highway corridors in America, and it runs straight through a stretch locals call the Dead Zone. But that's not even the weird part. You think Florida's beaches, theme parks, retirement money? That's the brochure. What nobody tells you is some towns here weren't abandoned. They were bypassed. Others were built around prisons, or psychiatric hospitals, or belief systems. And surprisingly, the creepiest ones don't advertise it. So today, we're digging into the places that feel normal until they don't. Wait till you see what happened in Vernon. Like the video if you enjoy mild existential discomfort. Subscribe like it's storm prep. You don't need it until you really need it. Let's break it down. Number 10. Spook Hill, Florida. If you ever want proof your brain can lie to you, put your car in neutral on Spook Hill. It rolls uphill. At least, that's what it feels like. Lake Wales markets this like a roadside magic trick. You park at a painted white line, shift to neutral, and your car appears to drift backward, up the hill. Local folklore says a giant gator spirit is still battling a Native American chief beneath the earth. Cute story. Great postcards. And the town itself? Quiet. Median home price in Lake Wales hovers around the low to mid $200,000, cheaper than Florida's state median. Population, roughly 16,000. Crime rate, slightly above the national average, but not dramatically so. It's not a ghost town, it's just normal, which makes the illusion hit harder, because nothing about the surroundings screams supernatural. It's suburban calm, palms, stop signs, retirees. But then your car moves the wrong way, and that's where the crack forms. Spook Hill is a gravity hill, an optical illusion caused by a sloping horizon and obscured sightlines. The land around it tilts in a way that tricks your depth perception. What looks uphill is actually downhill. No paranormal spike, no magnetic anomaly, no government cover-up. Just human perception failing basic geometry. Surprisingly, this isn't rare. There are dozens of gravity hills worldwide. But what nobody tells you is how uncomfortable it feels when your body disagrees with your eyes. For about 10 seconds, physics feels optional. And here's the thing. Lake Wales sits on part of Florida's Lake Wales Ridge, one of the oldest geological formations in the state. Slight elevation changes matter there. Subtle slopes, long horizons, enough to fool you. It's not haunted, it's topography. You leave laughing, but then you drive away slightly less confident in your senses. And that's the real creep factor. Florida already has sinkholes, hurricane tracks, and highways nicknamed dead zones. Add in the fact that your brain can misread something as basic as slope, and suddenly the state feels less stable. Spook Hill is harmless, but it plants a seed. If you can't trust incline, what else are you misreading? And by the way, Florida roadside attractions are undefeated. We have a town built around a mailbox, a swamp that swallows entire cars, and now a hill that gaslights your suspension system. Meanwhile, other states are bragging about waterfalls. We're out here arguing with gravity. Respect it. Spook Hill isn't the scariest place on this list. It's the warm-up, because if a simple slope can mess with your head, just wait until we get to the town that built its entire economy around something far heavier than gravity. And if you think a hill rolling backward is strange, the next place didn't just bend perception, it bent reality for thousands of people. Number 9. Vernon, Florida. There was a time when Vernon was called Nub City. Yeah, that kind of nickname. Today, Vernon is small-town panhandle quiet. Population, just under 700. Median home value, hovering around the low $150,000. Well below Florida's state median. Median household income, roughly mid-$30,000. Cost of living, about 15 to 20% below the national average. It looks like a place where nothing dramatic happens. Pine trees, modest homes, Dollar General energy. But in the 1950s, Vernon made national headlines for something deeply unsettling. A cluster of residents allegedly maimed themselves, shotgun blasts to limbs, to collect insurance payouts. The pattern was widespread enough to draw state investigation and national media attention. That's not folklore, that's documented desperation. Was every story true? Probably not. Rural exaggeration spreads fast, but enough cases were confirmed to stain the town's identity permanently. And here's the uncomfortable math. Limited job market, agriculture-based economy, few mobility pathways, low median income, sparse healthcare access. When opportunity narrows, risk tolerance expands. Vernon's unemployment rate often runs slightly above state averages. Commute times are longer because work isn't local. Poverty levels trend higher than Florida overall. When economic mobility shrinks, people get creative, sometimes too creative. Imagine living somewhere where one generation's desperation becomes your inherited reputation. You grow up in a quiet town, and Google tells the world it's famous for self-inflicted shotgun wounds. That sticks. It affects perception, property values, investment, pride. The creep factor isn't gore, it's normalization. It's how economic strain can bend morality until it snaps. And here's the twist. Vernon today isn't lawless. Crime rates are moderate for a rural town. Violent crime isn't spiking. It's not chaos. It's just history that won't fully fade. Florida has beach towns, space launches, billion-dollar condos, and somehow this tiny dot became infamous for insurance fraud extremism. Branding matters. Also, rural insurance loopholes in the 1950s? Wild. You could insure a limb separately. Who designed that policy? A cartoon villain? Yes, I'd like to insure my left arm for $10,000. That's not coverage, that's incentive. Modern underwriting departments would shut that down in about 6 seconds. Be honest, if a town had a dark economic past like that, would you move there if housing was cheap? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments. Number 8. Carrabelle, Florida. Carrabelle doesn't look dangerous. It looks like a screensaver. Boats rocking in the harbor, pastel houses, Gulf breeze doing its thing. Population? About 1,100. Median home price? Around the mid-$200,000 range, cheaper than most of coastal Florida. Violent crime rate? Low, below national averages most years. On paper, this is the quiet life people say they want. But then, hurricane season shows up. Carrabelle sits on Florida's forgotten coast in Franklin County. Fishing town, tourism bump in summer. Median household income floats in the low to mid-$40,000. Cost of living slightly below national average. It markets tranquility. And honestly, on a calm day, it's perfect. Until you remember this stretch of coastline has taken repeated direct hits. Hurricane Elena, Kate, Dennis, and most notably Michael in 2018. Which caused catastrophic wind damage across the region. Storm surge doesn't care about charm. Hurricane Michael alone caused over $25 billion in damage statewide. Franklin County was hammered. Insurance premiums across the Panhandle spiked after. Here's where it gets interesting. Carrabelle's flood risk score is significantly higher than the national average. A meaningful percentage of properties sit in FEMA-designated flood zones. That means elevated insurance costs, stricter building codes, and constant rebuild calculations. Jobs? Limited. Fishing, hospitality, seasonal tourism. Unemployment fluctuates more than Florida's urban centers. You don't just buy a house here, you negotiate with weather. Surprisingly, residents stay. They rebuild. They reinforce. But every hurricane season resets the question, is this the year? Living in Carrabelle means loving something fragile. Insurance premiums can rival mortgage payments. Property values swing with storm memory. Retirement plans here depend on wind direction. And yet, sunsets hit different on the forgotten coast. That's the trap. It's beautiful enough to make you forget the math. Florida, come for the beach. Also Florida, please sign this 14-page hurricane disclosure. And remember Spook Hill, the place that gaslights your suspension system? Carrabelle gaslights your sense of permanence. Also, hurricane prep shopping is chaos. You haven't lived until you've seen grown adults fighting over bottled water like it's concert tickets. And why does everyone buy bread? What are we making during a Category 4? French toast for the apocalypse? Priorities, people. Here's the thing. Carrabelle isn't creepy because it's abandoned. It's creepy because it's committed. People build, and rebuild again, knowing the coastline keeps receipts. And if you think negotiating with hurricanes is unsettling, wait until we get to the town where the instability isn't weather. It's built into the history itself. Number 7. Brooksville, Florida. Brooksville looks like it should be on a Hallmark postcard. Oak canopies, brick streets, antique shops. Population? About 9,000. Median home price hovering around the mid-$280K. Cheaper than Tampa, but not exactly bargain bin Florida either. Low-key charming, weekend festival energy. The kind of place people describe as historic with a soft smile. And that word, historic, is doing a lot of work. Brooksville sits in Hernando County, about an hour north of Tampa. Cost of living slightly below the national average. Median household income around the low to mid-$50,000. Crime rate roughly near national averages. Not a war zone, not a sanctuary. It markets heritage, southern charm, small town stability. And if you're just passing through, that's all you see. But then you start reading. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Brooksville was the site of documented racial violence.
Protesters are gathered in front of the Brooksville courthouse,
including lynchings. These weren't rumors, they're recorded in archives. Newspaper ink doesn't fade that easily. And here's the uncomfortable contrast. The downtown district is preserved, restored, polished, but some of the ugliest parts of its history are barely marked. What nobody tells you is how common that is in small southern towns. Preservation focuses on buildings, not always on memory. Surprisingly, Brooksville today is considered relatively safe compared to many Florida cities its size. Schools rank average to slightly above in some districts. It's attracting slow suburban spillover from Tampa as housing prices rise there. One city reinvents, another remembers. And sometimes those two goals don't align. Living in Brooksville means living in layers. You can enjoy farmers markets on Saturday and drive past land that once held public violence. Does that define the town today? No. But does it disappear because the sidewalks are cute? Also no. Here's the irony. Brooksville feels safer now than some flashier Florida cities. Yet its past is far darker than places that get more negative press. Complicated roots. That's creepier than abandoned buildings. Brooksville today is statistically safer than parts of Miami. But Miami doesn't have to reconcile with oak trees that watched history happen. And can we talk about historic district branding? Every town slaps that label on a few brick buildings and calls it depth. History isn't exposed brick in a wine bar. It's messy. It's uncomfortable. If you're going to sell charm, at least acknowledge the full receipt. Brooksville isn't haunted. It's curated. And if you think selective memory is unsettling, wait until we get to the place where danger isn't in the past. It's measured in annual accident statistics and concrete. Number 6. I-4, Dead Zone, Florida. There's a 132-mile stretch of highway in Florida that locals call the Dead Zone. Not because it's empty, because it's not. Interstate 4 runs from Tampa to Daytona Beach, cutting through Orlando like a concrete spine. It's one of the busiest highways in the state. Theme parks, commuters, tourists who thought renting a convertible in August was a good idea. This corridor regularly ranks among Florida's most crash-heavy interstates. Tens of thousands of crashes are reported annually along I-4, with hundreds of serious injuries and fatalities in bad years. Traffic volume? Massive. In some sections near Orlando, daily traffic exceeds 140,000 vehicles. And then there's the legend. Built over Seminole burial grounds. Cursed. Doomed. Paranormal payback. Cool story. But then you look at the math. High density, aggressive lane changes, constant construction, tourists unfamiliar with exits, sudden rainstorms, speed differentials between retirees and rental Mustangs. Florida's overall traffic fatality rate consistently ranks above the national average. Combine that with one of the most visited tourist regions in America, and you don't need a curse, you need better merge etiquette. Surprisingly, certain redesigned sections have reduced crash rates after widening and improved signage. Engineering works, gradually, but perception lingers. When enough accidents cluster in one corridor, it feels supernatural. Living near I-4 means planning your life around it. Commute times fluctuate wildly. Insurance premiums creep higher in metro counties along the route. Stress becomes background noise. You don't just drive I-4, you brace for it. Here's the irony. This dead zone connects some of the safest suburban neighborhoods in Florida to some of the happiest tourist destinations on Earth. One road, two realities. And can we talk about I-4 drivers? You've got someone doing 52 in the left lane next to someone doing 97 while filming a TikTok. Meanwhile, it rains for 6 minutes and everyone forgets physics. It's not cursed. It's chaotic neutral energy with turn signals. Picture this. You're merging at sunset. Sky's pink. Disney fireworks in the distance. Semi-truck on your right. Brake lights flare ahead like a warning constellation. Your podcast cuts out. You grip the wheel just a little tighter. Whew, that's I-4. I-4 isn't creepy because of ghosts. It's creepy because it proves infrastructure amplifies human behavior, good and bad. And if you think a highway with a reputation is unsettling, the next place on this list built its entire identity around something far heavier than traffic. Number 5. Moorhaven, Florida. Moorhaven exists because water once killed thousands. That's not a metaphor. That's 1928. Moorhaven sits on the southwest edge of Lake Okeechobee. Population, roughly 1,700. Median home value, around the mid to low $180,000. Median household income, typically under $40,000, well below Florida's state median. It markets itself as a quiet lakeside community. Fishing, boating, slower pace, cost of living slightly below the national average. Crime rate, generally moderate for a rural town. Not chaos, not spotless. On the surface, it feels like old Florida. But then you look at the levee. In 1928, the Okeechobee hurricane caused catastrophic flooding when the lake overflowed. Thousands died across the region. Entire communities were erased. Moorhaven was nearly wiped out. After that, the Herbert Hoover Dike was built, a massive 143-mile earthen levee surrounding the lake. Moorhaven doesn't just sit by water, it sits behind a containment strategy. The Army Corps of Engineers has spent decades reinforcing sections of the dike due to seepage risks and structural concerns. Billions in federal investment have gone into maintaining it. That's the atmosphere shift. This isn't scenic waterfront living, it's engineered survival. Living in Moorhaven means trusting infrastructure every day. Insurance rates fluctuate depending on flood mapping revisions. Economic opportunity is limited. Agriculture and government work dominate. Commute times can stretch because jobs aren't abundant locally. It's quiet, but it's not accidental. Here's the contrast. You've got ultra-secure, master-planned suburbs in parts of Florida built around artificial lakes with zero flood history, and then Moorhaven, built beside one of the most historically volatile bodies of water in the state. Safe cul-de-sac versus inherited vulnerability. And here's the ironic part. Property is cheaper here precisely because risk is priced in. Also, lakes in Florida are not the same as lakes in, say, Colorado. Up north, lakes are serene Instagram backdrops. In Florida, a lake can decide it's done behaving and rearrange your zip code. Respect the water. It has a resume. Picture waking up before sunrise. Humidity already sitting heavy, the lake flat and silent. You drive past the levee, that long earthen wall, on your way to work. It's just there, quiet, holding. You don't think about it every day, but you know. Would you live behind a massive levee if the home price was right? Yes or no? Number 4. Miracle Village, Florida. Miracle Village looks peaceful. That's the first thing that messes with you. Small homes, neatly kept lawns, palm trees. Population? Around 200 residents. It sits near Pahokee by Lake Okeechobee. Quiet, low property values. Homes historically priced well under Florida's median. Cost of living modest. Crime rate? Not unusually high compared to surrounding rural areas. On paper, it's just another tiny Florida community, but then you learn why it exists. Miracle Village was established in 2009 by a nonprofit organization to provide housing for registered sex offenders, many of whom couldn't legally live elsewhere due to Florida's residency restrictions near schools, parks, or bus stops. Florida has some of the strictest residency laws in the country. In certain counties, offenders cannot live within 1,000 to 2,500 feet of places where children gather. Do the math in dense cities. There's almost nowhere left. So Miracle Village became a solution. Structured housing, accountability, reintegration attempts. Not exile, not freedom, something in between. The unemployment rate among residents historically runs high. Re-entry into the workforce is difficult with felony records. Many rely on limited income jobs, disability benefits, or nonprofit support. Property values remain low due to stigma, not necessarily crime data. That's the twist. The surrounding area's violent crime rates aren't dramatically different from nearby rural towns. The fear is conceptual, not statistical. What nobody tells you is this place isn't chaotic. It's orderly. Rules, monitoring, structure. The discomfort comes from proximity to a moral debate most people prefer abstract. Miracle Village makes it physical. Imagine living in a town where every neighbor shares the same label. No anonymity, no hiding. That changes how a community forms. Picture this. Late afternoon, humid air off the lake, quiet street, lawns trimmed. A couple of residents talking near a porch. It feels calm, controlled, almost suburban. But the reason the town exists hums underneath everything. Housing here isn't about lifestyle. It's about legality. Here's the ironic line. Florida builds luxury gated communities to keep people out, and Miracle Village to keep people somewhere. Different gates, same principle. Also, Florida zoning laws are wild. You can't live near a playground, a bus stop, or sometimes even a sidewalk if it's classified the wrong way. At some point, the map just becomes red lines everywhere. Urban planning meets moral panic. And the result? A village that sounds fictional but isn't. Miracle Village isn't creepy because it's loud. It's creepy because it's deliberate. It forces a question most towns avoid. What do you do with people after punishment? And if you think that's uncomfortable, the next place on this list doesn't revolve around crime, it revolves around belief. And that atmosphere is something else entirely. Number 3. Cassadaga, Florida. Cassadaga doesn't hide what it is. It prints it on the sign. Psychic capital of the world. Population? Roughly 3,000 if you include the surrounding area. Median home prices hover in the mid to high $200,000. Not outrageous for Central Florida. Cost of living sits slightly below the national average. Crime rate? Generally low. Quieter than many towns its size. On paper, it's stable, calm, livable, but that's not why people go. Founded in the late 1800s as a spiritualist camp, Cassadaga was built around the belief that communication with the dead is possible and normal. Not Halloween cosplay, not seasonal gimmicks, daily practice. There are dozens of registered mediums, spiritual healers, and psychic readers operating openly. The town runs guided walking tours. The Cassadaga Hotel markets its spiritual energy as part of the stay. This isn't a haunted attraction, it's an organized belief economy. Here's what nobody tells you. Cassadaga functions like a co-op of metaphysical professionals. Many practitioners are certified through spiritualist organizations. There's structure, training, community governance. It's not chaotic mysticism, it's regulated mysticism. Tourism fuels part of the economy. Small businesses, readings, events. Residents aren't fringe drifters. Many are retirees, artists, service workers. Unemployment trends mirror other small Florida towns. But the atmosphere shifts because belief is embedded into the infrastructure. Imagine living somewhere where your neighbor's job title is medium, and that's normal. Surprisingly, skeptics visit and still report feeling something. That's not evidence of spirits, that's social psychology. When a whole town leans into a shared narrative, it alters perception. Belief scales. Living in Cassadaga means existing inside a worldview. That can be comforting. It can also be isolating if you don't buy in. Property values remain moderate because the niche identity limits mass migration. It's not a corporate suburb. It's not a booming job market. It's a cultural pocket. Here's the ironic line. Some towns build around industry. Some build around water. Cassadaga built around the afterlife. And somehow, it works. Also, Florida humidity plus incense smoke, that's a commitment. You walk into a reading room and it's 92 degrees with spiritual ambiance. I respect the vibe, but a C is the real miracle worker down here. Cassadaga isn't creepy because it's dangerous. It's creepy because certainty lives there, and certainty about the unseen is powerful. And if you think a town built on belief is strange, the next place on this list doesn't just believe in something, it was built to contain something far heavier. Number 2. Chattahoochee, Florida. Chattahoochee is a town of about 3,000 people. For decades, thousands more lived there who weren't counted the same way. Chattahoochee sits in the Florida Panhandle, right on the Georgia border. Small town pace. Median home values typically in the mid $120K to low $150K. Cheap by Florida standards. Median household income? Around the low to mid $30K. Cost of living well below the national average. Quiet streets, river views, rural calm. But the defining structure in town isn't a church or a marina. It's Florida State Hospital. Established in 1876, it became one of the largest psychiatric institutions in the state. At its peak in the mid-20th century, thousands of patients lived there at once, effectively doubling or tripling the town's daily population footprint. This wasn't a side feature. It was the gravitational center. For decades, the hospital was one of the area's largest employers. Entire families worked there. Generations. Institutional towns are different. When one facility dominates the economy, it shapes identity. Crime rates in Chattahoochee today are moderate for a town its size, not wildly dangerous. But poverty rates remain above state averages. Job growth is slow. Economic mobility is limited outside government or correctional roles. And here's the uncomfortable layer. Mid-century psychiatric care in America wasn't gentle. Overcrowding, underfunding, institutionalization that lasted years, sometimes lifetimes. Some former hospital cemeteries contain hundreds of unmarked graves. Let that sit for a second. Not folklore, records. Surprisingly, parts of the hospital campus are still operational, though at far smaller capacity than its peak. The scale shrank. The history didn't. Imagine growing up in a town where the biggest building isn't a school or mall. It's a psychiatric institution with 140+ years of history. That changes the air. Not because something is actively wrong, because something was. Also, can we admit something? Small towns built around one employer always feel one policy change away from panic. Factory closes, base relocates, budget cuts. Suddenly, the diner's empty. Economic diversification isn't sexy, but neither is betting your entire zip code on one institution. Some towns are known for theme parks. Chattahoochee was known for containment, and that legacy lingers. Number 1. Yeehaw Junction, Florida. Yeehaw Junction has a population of around 200 people. At one point, tens of thousands pass through it every single day. That's the difference between relevance and rerouting. Yeehaw Junction sits at the crossroads of State Road 60 and Florida's Turnpike in Osceola County. It was once a critical stop for drivers cutting across the state. Gas, motels, food, reset. Then, highway expansions and route optimizations shifted traffic patterns. And when traffic shifts, towns either adapt or they wait. Median home values in the surrounding area are relatively low compared to Central Florida's exploding suburbs. Employment? Limited, mostly service-based. Gas stations, travel plazas, a handful of small businesses. Crime rate? Not especially high. It's not dangerous. It's quiet. Too quiet for a place built for motion. Here's what makes Yeehaw Junction different from a ghost town. It never fully died. It just got bypassed. Traffic volume along adjacent corridors dropped significantly after rerouting improvements. Fewer drivers exit, fewer overnight stays, fewer impulse stops, and a town designed for pass-through survival struggles when no one passes through. There's no industry anchor, no college, no manufacturing hub, just highway infrastructure and hope. Surprisingly, some residents prefer it this way. Fewer tourists, less noise, slower life. But slower life without growth isn't peace, it's stagnation. Imagine living where the biggest sound is wind over asphalt, late afternoon sun bleaching the highway signs, the smell of hot pavement, a single semi-truck roaring past every few minutes. You sit on your porch. It's calm, safe, predictable, but every empty exit ramp is a reminder. The world chose another route. One Reddit-style local quote summed it up perfectly. It's not that nothing happens here, it's that everything happens somewhere else. That's not horror movie creepy. That's existential. Here's the ironic joke. Florida builds billion-dollar theme parks that pull global traffic, and then there's Yeehaw Junction, waiting for someone to miss their exit. Also, can we talk about highway towns in general? They're like middle managers of geography. Essential for a minute, forgotten the next. One new bypass and suddenly your whole business model is nostalgia and beef jerky. Infrastructure giveth, infrastructure ghosteth. It's patient, and patience feels eerie when growth is happening everywhere else in Florida. This is the creepiest place on the list because nothing catastrophic happened. No storm, no scandal, no collapse, just irrelevance. And irrelevance doesn't make headlines. It just leaves the lights on. If this list made you uncomfortable in a weirdly thoughtful way, hit like. It helps more than you think. Subscribe like it's GPS rerouting you before you miss something important. Because Florida doesn't just abandon towns, it outgrows them. And sometimes, that's worse.